Mathias Hansen back with another episode of Counting Down to Laravel Live Denmark. I'm joined today by Rasmus Nielsen, who's going to be on stage for Laravel Live Denmark in August. Rasmus, how are you doing?
Hey Matthias, good to see you. Yeah, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. So, Rasmus, before we get into your talk, let's start by talking a bit about your origin story. How did you come into being a developer working computers? What are your earliest memories?
Yeah, well, as I was growing up, actually, I remember we always had computers in the house, even though my dad, he was a taxi driver by profession, but he was very, fascinated with computers, always reading magazines, and so I remember in the like early mid 90s, we had an Amiga at home where I would play Pac-Man and just that kind of thing, and then later on we would get Windows 95 and all the subsequent ones. So yeah, I guess I was always exposed to computers at home.
Yeah, so you say you played Pac-Man on the Amiga. Do you remember any other games from that time?
It's such a long time ago, so
Yeah.
I would say that the memories are very blurry. But as for like web development and programming, I think it started like one summer break from school when I was like 11 years old, and I was on MSN Messenger with a friend from class, and he sent me this link to a website called html.dk that was
Hmm.
kind of like a forum and had a bunch of tutorials. And so he sent me that link, and I was like, what's all that about? And he was like, yeah, with this way you can like make websites and stuff like that. And I remember I was a bit skeptical at first. I was like, yeah, what use is it to me? But I still like I was bored, so I just kind of started checking out this tutorial. And before I knew it, I made my first website, and I thought it was really cool. And I just it kind of stuck with me from there. Went on to CSS, and yeah, so at an early age, I guess I kind of started doing websites and then went on with programming from there.
So, Rasmus, you're of course a Laravel developer, and work with PHP. Have you always worked with PHP, or have you also worked with other server-side languages, or done desktop apps, or anything,
Hmm.
even mobile apps, stuff like that?
Yeah, so PHP was my first like server-side programming language, and I actually remember, after making my first website with HTML and CSS, I was like, hey, this is pretty cool, but what can I do with it, And so I remember sitting down reading up like how does one like make a login system? How does one make it do a bit more? And I remember seeing like on one hand, at the time at least, it was kind of like on one hand you have PHP, which is kind of like the open source and a bit more community driven, and on the other hand, like it would be something like ASP.NET, which was I remember reading at the time was a bit more closed. It was a bit more Microsoft, and but they kind of could do the same thing. And so it wasn't like some big strategic decision or anything, but I was like, hey, PHP sounds pretty cool. And so that's kind of what I went with. And I would say that's the one I've been doing ever since. But of course, I've also done a bunch of Node.js and just dabbled in other things during the whole crypto thing. I did a bit of Solidity and just exploring and testing out different things. Yeah.
So you've always been curious, trying new technologies, exploring new things.
Pretty much, pretty much. Also, kind of touching on your chat with Dan Johnson, I've also done a bit of hardware and a bit of Arduino and that kind of thing. But yeah,
Oh, tell me more.
well, I'd say just as I've always been interested in programming, I've also, have this fondness of hardware and, just kind of playing around with electricity. And, I would always, as a kid, I would always like take apart alarm clocks just to see like what's inside, how does it work, what can I do with it? And, Lego Mindstorms was probably my big
Yeah.
kind of first investment with my allowance. I think I saved for like a year to go and buy the big Lego Mindstorms kit, and it was pretty cool. Like being able to just building robots, making see like just seeing what you can do with electronics, basically.
Yeah, so Lego Mindstorms was slash is this core you can program, right? And like attach motors and lights and sensors and stuff, right? And you have
Mm,
this whole. I think they had Rasmus, I think they had like a building block system or something, like block programming or something. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. It wasn't like you sat down and wrote any scripts or anything, but it was very much like, these building blocks that you can wait for 2 seconds, then turn on this motor and do this thing and wait for if this input meets a certain threshold and do this. And so it was very much like the same kind of logical thoughts behind it, but a lot more visual obviously so that kids could also do stuff with it.
That's really cool. Do you remember anything particular you built with the Mindstorms robots kit?
So I think I built kind of this robot or this it was almost like an animal with like the that could like sense with where it was. Well, anyway, it was like this little cart that had sensors, so it could like stick to a lane, or it could drive on a table without falling down. When it feels it's at the edge of a table, then it reverses and changes direction and that kind of stuff.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
It's great fun for sure.
So you had this sensor, so it was like following a line around on a piece of paper or whatever.
Yeah, there was also like a light sensor that could kind of sense color, but not really. But it could certainly like sense brightness, and so in that sense, you could also make it follow a line.
That's really cool. So have you done any projects with hardware recently? You talk about Arduino.
Yeah. I mean, Arduino kind of came into play when I was in high school. I kind of had electronics as a subject because I was very interested. And I think at that time for one of our projects we built kind of like this laser tag game where we actually like build out the components ourselves and with hardware and all the resistors and transistors and everything it required to kind of have like a belt strapped on with a sensor, and then we could go around and shoot each other in school. That was pretty fun.
That sounds super fun.
But the most recent one was I built like a dog fooding, like a kind of like a food machine for my dog. So whenever he go presses a button or something with his nose, then he will get some treats and stuff like that. So just a little side projects.
That is awesome. So Rasmus, you're gonna be speaking about concurrency with PHP and Laravel at Laravel Live Denmark.
Mm.
So there's lots of different ways to handle concurrency with PHP. Do you want to give us sort of a high level intro to sort of direction of what you're gonna cover?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very much a scratch my own itch kind of thing, where because PHP is a very synchronous language, and most of the time we don't really have to know about it or dealing with concurrency. But I'd say as part of my day job, we kind of run a lot of kind of microservice architecture with Laravel or distributed services. So specifically, we are very exposed to some Laravel applications having to make HTTP requests across the stack, and that kind of, especially if you need to run things in parallel, things can very quickly become a little more complicated than if you just make one request and wait for it to finish and then make the next one. And since also I've done a bunch of JavaScript as well. I mean the whole concurrency model is just very different there. So that will kind of be my starting point of, especially around HTTP requests and how if you are making a lot of HTTP requests, how can you kind of orchestrate it and basically make your application faster?
Yeah, so that was my next question was this is essentially a big part of this is making your application more responsive.
Yeah.
By speeding up requests.
Exactly. But I think also, one thing or something I'm also I'm gonna spend some time like digging into what even is concurrency, and is it the same as running things in parallel, and what is blocking IO, and how do we encounter it in general in our applications, and then of course what can we do to make it faster.
Yeah, because there's also the classic concept of multi-threading, right, and running things in threads, and that's a whole nother can of worms, which is separate from this, right?
It is, but it's definitely also a valid approach if you have, especially if you have a lot of CPU intensive work that you can do in parallel, then multi-threading is definitely a good option. But it's not necessarily the most efficient option or hardware efficient option if all you're doing is waiting for the applications to respond.
Mm.
That's something that I didn't know very much about before I started this whole journey the past couple of years, I'd say.
And I guess complexity is a big thing too, like, trying to maintain your code that does things and concurrently or in parallel and whatnot. Especially with threading, I've seriously gotten bitten in the past because when things truly run concurrently, it can get really complicated and you can get some, weird crashes because of things trying to be accessed or written to at the same time.
For sure, it can spin out of control very quickly if you don't know what your app is doing, or even if you do, it's just you don't necessarily foresee those problems up front.
Yeah, so I guess are you going to talk about some methods that are a little bit easier to manage than?
Yeah, again with the whole scratching out, it really is like how to optimize, or minimize blocking IO basically, and optimize the things that you can do concurrently, and then without necessarily spinning up more processes, but just kind of, for instance, firing off multiple HTTP requests and then waiting for some of them to return, and then do a bit of processing, and then do some other things, and specifically we will also touch on concurrency frameworks such as AMPHP and other frameworks like that, and how they actually work under the hood.
That's really exciting. That's really exciting. So Rasmus, I wanna switch gears a little bit and actually talk a little bit about AI coding. It's huge these days,
Mm.
and I know you've from the Danish Laravel community, and we've gone to meetups together. I actually saw a talk you did recently on basically the same subject, so it's exciting. But I know that a lot of the talks recently has also been about coding with cursor or things like that. Uh, how is AI or LLM driven programming affecting your day-to-day job right now or your workflows?
So, I mean, it kind of depends on which projects, and also how much on the projects that I kind of control myself, or where I know that where it's okay to utilize AI. I do utilize it a fair bit. I think, well, I would say my favorite tool at the moment is Claude Code, which I
Mm-hmm.
have been using, I think, for like half a year now. I was pretty early on to get in the early access program, and I have used it quite a bit since. I the way I use it, I'd say the way I use Claude Code is it's very much like a junior developer, or kind of we'll go through the plans together, and then I'll kind of monitor it and make sure that it's on the right path, but it's basically just writing all the boilerplate code or scaffolding all the code, and then I'll jump in and finish it and make sure that everything is the way I want it to be. But I think it is a really good way to just get more done. And for me, I don't find so much that I lose control or that I forget how to do it myself. It's just that it can just do it a lot faster than me, and I've written this code 100 times before. I don't need to keep writing the same things. So in that sense, it's a bit more like just do all the grunt work that I don't really want to do myself. And
Yeah.
then on some other clients that are very enterprisey, it's very much, there's a lot of compliance, and it's there's some limits to how much of the code base can I let the AI see, just for the sake of security and internal software.
So there's a big challenge still with how can we do this securely and in a compliant way that follows compliance procedures, right?
Exactly, yeah. And and sometimes I do miss it, to that there is an AI that just has all the context of the project, when it's like, well, I can write these tests myself, but why not let the AI do it, just because, or at least like have a crack at it, and then I'll adapt it.
Yeah, take your first step, get like things scaffolded so you can have like a base point to jump off of.
Yeah, exactly. But also, I would say like just having ChatGPT, having Claude, like just as a chat, to have a chat about things. I mean, a lot of the times I also find that it works a bit like rubber ducking, like even just
Yeah.
writing out the problem. It's like, hey, I think I just solved it in my head. I don't even need to send this query, but just saying it out loud basically can do a lot. And then of course, like, just having the AI respond to you, and brainstorm on some ideas or some naming, or I use that a lot throughout my day as well.
Yeah. So you're talking about a lot about hey, it makes things a lot faster, right? So one thing I experience is it definitely increases productivity significantly, but it's kind of having the effect of it just raises the bar and the ambitions of what we want to get done or what we think we can get done suddenly. So it doesn't really, it's not really making me work less. It's just making us increase our ambitions like crazy and try to get so much more done because now it seems possible. Do you see that as well?
I
In
I,
your
com-
work?
I completely agree. Like, never felt more. I was gonna say I never felt more busy than I currently do. I mean, and that sounds bad, but it's I don't necessarily see it that way. It's just more like I don't feel that I'm running out of things I want to build. Quite the contrary. Like just the threshold of when I want to build it has, all of the sudden yeah, like with code being a lot cheaper or a lot faster, it just means that there's even more like that you can. And I feel that in my own side projects as well, that all of the sudden I'm able to complete features a lot faster and just, yeah, improve the product essentially.
Yeah, I think one of my big fears now is essentially we're gonna write so much more code and build so much more infrastructure to maintain. There's definitely a long term like considerations
Mm,
to to have or yeah, consider for, oh my god, we're building all this stuff, we're shipping all this stuff, well, we have to support it
yeah,
forever and maintain it and uh,
yeah,
testing and things like that.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
interesting.
So I mean, hopefully AI will also be there to help with that because otherwise we all screwed.
Yeah. Yeah, please help with that too.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So Rasmus, you live in Denmark, but you are kind of on the on the western side of the country. You're actually near Aarhus, right, which is the second largest city in Denmark.
That's right. The second largest city that nobody outside of Denmark has ever heard of.
It's a
But
really really lovely city, and there's a lot to
it
see in Aarhus.
it is. I think here in Aarhus, the local politicians like to call it the smallest big city you've ever heard of or will ever visit.
That's a nice slogan, yeah.
Yeah, but it is a lovely city and it's very manageable to get around and it has most things you need. But obviously, coming to Copenhagen or even big cities outside of Denmark, it's we were just in London and I mean that's like a whole lot of scale of how what you can do and see and how big the city is.
Yeah, for sure. That makes perfect sense. But either way, is there anything in particular you love to see or do or eat or experience when going to Copenhagen for the conference?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of cool places. There's a lot of good restaurants. Last time at Laravel Live, we did check out War Pigs that I think Jacob mentioned on the other podcast.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
Yeah, lots of good places to get like good craft beer and I like a good IPA.
yeah,
And I would say one thing, if the weather is nice, I have often seen people sailing around the river in those go boats.
yeah.
I mean, that just looks really that looks really fun and just a good place to enjoy sunny weather and just hanging out with friends. So maybe if the weather allows it and there's some people around, then we can all hop in a boat and go for an hour or two.
That sounds like so much fun. That's a small electric boat that you can rent, right? And you're gonna sail yourself without, any
Exactly.
requirements. You just go. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I actually did that. We had some friends visiting a couple of years ago, and it was a really lovely day. We got on one of those boats, and there's no like canopy or anything on the boat. They're completely open. And we
Mm.
got like halfway through the trip to the other end of the canals in the Copenhagen, and it started pouring. And it's a really, really slow boat. This is not a speed boat.
No, no.
So, that was a great memory. It was certainly a great memory.
I mean that's the thing, like being out in the open, being underwater. It's like yeah, you have to challenge your inner sailor and just go with whatever the weather throws at you, especially in Denmark, I guess.
Some might say you're in a Viking.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
All right, well, we should definitely make that happen. That could be so much fun.
Let's
Maybe
do
get
it.
a small fleet of boats for the conference. That'll be fun.
That would be so much fun.
All right, well, thank you so much for chatting with me, Rasmus. Really excited for your talk and to see you at Laravel Live Denmark.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'll see you there. Look forward to it.
That was Rasmus sharing his journey as a software developer. If you want to hear more from Rasmus, come see his talk at Laravel Live Denmark. Go get your tickets at laravelive.dk.